let's start off like this. Rudy Giuliani has done a lot of interviews. He's said a lot of things. I bet you know about that. But that is actually starting to change, and it might be because he's feeling the heat. Two of Giuliani's indicted associates are back in court, pleading for now not guilty to campaign finance charges. And while Giuliani had said he doesn't think he needs a lawyer right now, as of tonight, CNN reporting Giuliani has been approaching defense attorneys for, yes, possible representation. And while Giuliani was not, to be clear and fair, mentioned in this indictment, we do know the feds are reportedly investigating him. And even from what's just publicly known, many parts of the probe look sprawling. It's searching email accounts, people's social media, several electronic devices, and this, perhaps most strikingly, quote, several unidentified premises. Now, that means we would expect people going to search homes or businesses or some other premises, which is a big deal. Not only that, but add up, 50 different bank accounts have been subpoenaed. So that's what the federal criminal case looks like, and that's enough. That's a lot. Then there's the scrutiny on Mr. Giuliani's dealings with the State Department, which is central to the impeachment probe. And Giuliani, on a lot of that stuff, he practically invited it.
I never talked to a Ukrainian official until the State Department called me and asked me to do it. And then I reported every conversation back to them. And Laura, I'm a pretty good lawyer, just a country lawyer, but it's all here, right here. The first call from the State Department, the debriefing of the State Department.
So why are they?
It's all right there. And notice he's not just saying his contacts are there. He is putting forward an argument some would call a defense, that the State Department was giving him direction. Well, you just heard from our experts in the previous segment on this show, as well as a lot of other evidence that State Department officials say it was the opposite. Now, all that phone waving could obviously invite some scrutiny. And, well, that's something on this show we reported at the time. It seemed like Giuliani was practically asking for a subpoena. He just held up his phone. Is he begging for a subpoena?
Oh, yeah. He just flat out asked for one. And frankly, he should have been getting one even if he hadn't held his phone up.
And with or without the phone wagging, yeah, he's been getting them. There are new signs that Giuliani's calls and texts could further become public because a federal judge is ordering the State Department, get this, to release records on Ukraine, which would include communications between Giuliani and Secretary of State Pompeo. Now, that is a different lane. It is a lawsuit that had asked basically for the government to release materials from a watchdog group. But all of this is adding up. You have Giuliani defying a congressional subpoena for related documents. He was also named in new congressional testimony as a leading and, quote, irregular person, irregular foreign policy efforts that he was leading. And two former federal prosecutors, who, of course, we've had on this show, Joyce Vance and Barbara McQuaid, have a new analysis writing they believe Giuliani could actually be indicted, quote, now for various crimes, including conspiracy to commit bribery and interfere in the elections. It's the person who ran around like he was in charge of something legitimate, getting State Department orders, is now being allegedly pushed into a lot of trouble because he's getting called out for, allegedly, and I say that to be fair, but running a shadow foreign policy. The people who work for the actual State Department on the other end of the phone wagging, the phone waving, the text, they're testifying. They opposed him. They worried about the lines he was crossing. And Giuliani is insisting, okay, even if you grant all of that, he has a new reason for everything he did. Check it out. It was all to discover evidence to defend his client, presumably Donald Trump. Well, legally, that doesn't mean much. He can gather all kinds of information for any client, including the president, but he can't break the law for the president. Just ask Michael Cohen. I'm joined by former federal prosecutor Paul Butler and columnist Mike Lupica. Gentlemen, good evening.
Hey, Ari.
Paul, I begin with you. As like Rudy, if you're a former federal prosecutor, explain it to us.
That's the only thing we have in common?
You tell me.
I hope so.
He is looking for a lawyer. He is changing his tune. He hasn't been on air recently. What do you see here?
I think he badly needs a lawyer. He's the subject of two sprawling investigations. One, a counterintelligence investigation by the FBI. Remember in that infamous call, Trump told Zelensky, talk to Rudy. Rudy's a back channel of foreign policy. John Bolton had concerns. Ambassador Taylor had concerns. Ambassador Yovanovitch had concerns. And so there's legitimate questions about whether he's compromised. Is he working for his Ukrainian business interests, or is he working for the United States?
Yeah, walk us through that part, Paul, because I just, on that point, right, double agent, who's he working for? He says he's working for Trump. That also serves to be his view that he doesn't have to register for any other governments that he might have ended up helping or lobbying for. But we've seen DOJ crack down on exactly that.
So he's got access. We know, Ari, he's not the greatest lawyer in the world. What clients hire him for is his access to the Oval Office, and he fully exploits that. He's in a meeting at the State Department, and he lobbies the Secretary of State to get one of his clients released. In the Oval Office, he brings up other clients. And so, you know, this is not someone who's acting on behalf of the interests of the United States. In that tweet yesterday where he said, everything I was doing was for Donald Trump. Ari, in the prosecution world, we call that a confession. He wasn't working for the United States. He was all about the Donald.
Well, you just put your finger on something that's subtle, because it might sound like, oh, wait, in traditional times with a different president, if you say you did something for the president, it might at least sound good, even if it's not a legal defense. But as you say here, if he's doing it for Donald Trump, the candidate, Donald Trump's political or business interests, that's the whole thing that the House is looking at as potentially impeachable. Mike, before I bring you in, I think you are the perfect person with your judgment, with your measurements, your measured analysis to look at recent Rudy Giuliani. With what we know now, that he's under investigation, that the pressure's building. Here he was relatively recently making his defenses. Take a look.
There's no claim even in the lawsuit that Joe Biden knew about this.
That naive.
No.
20 years of a Washington press corps that was...
We will get to that.
And I'd say, brother, cut it out, damn it. As opposed to, I don't know about it. I didn't hear it. And you all buy that. Bull. I'm in charge of Ukraine. They make $5 million.
I got a hard break.
China.
We have the transcript of the call and the point.
I know you want to defend it so bad.
I don't want to defend anything.
I'm
asking questions.
You do.
I am asking
it's pathetic.
Ari, who other than this president looks at this Rudy Giuliani and sees Clarence Darrow? I mean, start there. Who hires him to be his new fixer because his last fixer went to jail? I've been watching this guy for so long, and this is the Rudy Giuliani of his second term, the one that was stumbling through the bar until the planes hit the building.
And do you think when you look at him, because you say this as someone who's, been a reporter and watched Rudy Giuliani, do you think that Donald Trump basically sees something different? Because we've discussed a lot here. You said Clarence Darrow. Of course, we've discussed that Trump himself has said he wants a Roy Cohn.
He is impressed by Giuliani's celebrity. He's still going back to the guy who got called America's mayor for doing his job after the planes hit the building. He is enamored of celebrity. He is enamored of star power. But he hasn't been looking at who this guy is. He sees the old crime buster, the old prosecutor out of the 1980s. That ship sailed a long time ago. And you have seen this guy playing to the Fox News audience like those are the only people listening to him. And every time I watch him, I think of an old list the great Dan Jenkins made of the 10 stages of drunkenness. And it could be drunk with power or drunk with arrogance. Number 9 is invisible, and number 10 is bulletproof. And that's what this guy started to act like when he made himself a de facto Secretary of State. Yeah,
and I want to be clear. You mentioned Secretary of State. He auditioned for that job publicly, Paul. He didn't get it. He's clearly acted here in ways that seem against his own interest. We talked about him needing a lawyer. And, Paul, we heard from David Kelly, who worked for Giuliani, and mentioned that he really respected him as a prosecutor back when he worked for him, but doesn't understand what's happened to him, sees him as almost a Greek tragic figure. And I wonder, Paul, as a fellow prosecutor, what you see there and what you think of that. And I should mention in passing, We've had Jay Sekulow on, who's sort of his co-counsel to Donald Trump as a legal team, and we've invited him on the show before. We're happy to have him back to discuss any of this. But, Paul, how do you see that as someone who's had such a drastic shift, even from people we've had on who say positive things about his career, his record?
So I'm going to answer that question as both a federal prosecutor and an African-American man. I think the African-American and Latinx community in New York has always known the truth about Rudy, that he puts politics over policy, that he acts in ways that seem racist, that he has his own interest at heart. He's got a long checkered record. He had a shining moment when he stepped up when our country was under horrible attack on September 11th. Since then, I'm going to disagree with my buddy here. I think Trump knows exactly who Rudy is. That's why Trump hired him. Trump wants Roy Cohn, but be careful what you ask for. Roy Cohn got disbarred. We know who Rudy is by the people he hangs out with. He had this bizarre web of relationships with Parnas and Furman, these two guys who were indicted recently. Sometimes Rudy worked for them. He was their lawyer. Other times they worked for him. They were part of his legal team helping other people, including Trump, get dirt from the Ukrainians. Follow the money. The weird thing about these guys, these associates, is they seem like they're kind of broke. Parnas, he gets sued because he's not paying his Miami Heat season tickets. He and his wife get evicted from their property, and yet his business gives a $325,000 donation to a super PAC.
I got to fit in a break, but Mike, you know what we call that? We call that a closing argument. Paul Butler with strong views and receipts, and you two disagreed about some things, which we welcome around here. Different perspectives. Paul Butler, Mike Lupica, thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.